Emilie's finally getting a rerun, and I genuinely think she's one of the most underrated characters in the game. I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but she makes a lot of teams better, provides even more teams with side grades where you might be using the optimal unit somewhere else, and she enables fun teams for characters that don't get used often. This video is going to look at teams that have stood the test of time since she launched, some experimental teams, as well as some with characters that have released since her launch. Before we get into the teams, let's talk about the sponsor of the video, Loot Bar. They sell in-game currency for all kinds of gachas, including Genshin Impact and Star Rail, and it's up to 25% cheaper than in-game. They even have a 10% off coupon for new users, so you can save even more. Personally, I find the in-game prices are a bit too much, but the Loot Bar prices are a lot more reasonable. They worked with other creators you might have heard of, like Supera Tom and Raiden Shotgun, and have over 20,000 positive Trustpilot reviews. They're completely safe, but you can check their reputation on Google first if you want to. They are quite a well-known company, even outside of gacha. You only need the UID and server, and your crystals will go through immediately. Check the link in the description to grab some discounts. So when Emilie came out, we didn't have Kanich, but he released in the next patch as the first on-field burn-in DPS. On launch, he had a similar thing that Mualani had in that you'd run Xiangling despite it not being perfect, just so you could get enough off-field pyro application. Mawika does that though with a buff to the on-fielder, more damage than Xiangling, and she doesn't need energy for a burst. Kanich's Night Soul consumption will be more than enough to give a burst uptime. Kanich's Natlan passive gives him more skill damage than more teammates trigger Night Soul burst, so having Mawika in there in place of Dia or Xiangling is a nice benefit. Pyro MC is a solid free-to-play alternative to hold Deepwood, maybe the best version of MC we have as of right now. In terms of artifacts, you could stick 4-piece Deepwood on Emilie and 4-piece Scroll on Mawika to drive Kanich's damage higher, maybe try Deepwood on Mawika, or you could just give Mawika 4-piece Codex to push her damage higher and forget about Scroll. Those that didn't grab a copy of Kanich will be glad to know Arlecchino works well with Emilie. Bennett's attack benefits Arlecchino and Emilie, as well as his C6 giving Arlecchino more pyro damage. Emilie herself carries a lot of the damage you might have been getting from Xiangling had you run her in an Arlecchino mono pyro team, and then the last slot's a flex. Zhongli gives comfort and resistance shred. I also like him holding Favonius Lance here to give Emilie more energy. Kazuha buffs Arlecchino and makes sure we keep applying AoE pyro, which is useful if you go for him. Farina's an option too because she applies hydro so slowly that we can still keep burning uptime and vape a lot of the hits. I know it sounds stupid, but you could even use a Scoffia. She doesn't get much shred from her passive, but she gets a lot of that damage back from triggering melts. I like Farina better, but she's an option if Farina's occupied. Now, I know a lot of you simp for Wriothesley because you like a man with a bit of cake at the back, and cakes should smell as nice as they look, so let's look at how Emilie works with him. When you apply Pyro to Wriothesley's meat chasm and then apply Dendro to make it smell nice and delicious, you create an aura that gives you a lovely cake that stays warm. The warmth radiating from his backdoor fortress is so strong that even if you were to cover that cake in cryo and send it to the North Pole, it'll still melt the frost off a penguin's ass. Mawika brings even more cake to the party. If you don't have her, Tome is good at baking that cake once you obtain his C6 for the extra normal and charge attack damage, and you could even give him Deepwood for Emilie's damage. Pyro MC's an option for 4-piece Scroll. If not, you could always go with Xiangling with her being able to summon the literal stove god for optimal ass bakage. Mawika rides a motorbike, Mualani rides a shark. Makes sense we try them together. Mawika's applying pyro as well as giving Mualani a damage buff from a burst. Emilie gives us another source of damage in the burning aura, and Shalonin has resistance shred as well as the 4-piece Scroll damage buff. Having a few Natlan units in the team means Mualani gets more burst damage from a passive too. If you don't have Shalonin, Dahlia gives us the Hydro Resonance for the extra HP, but the attack speed isn't doing anything for Mualani. It is worth noting that Shalonin might struggle to react with Hydro after the first rotation because of the burning aura. For this reason, giving Dahlia 4-piece Scroll can buff Mualani's Hydro damage, but only by 12% because he's not from Natlan. I like to call this team Zookeeper Mawika because she's surrounded by animals like a shark, a leopard, and a French woman. Nouvelette likes to cry, so Emilie bought him some cologne to cheer him up. Now instead of smelling like a salty wet dragon, he can smell like the princess that he is. Mawika is here to dry his tears away, and Zhongli will drop a boulder on his head if he starts crying again. Nouvelette's so happy with all this support that he celebrates by doing his favourite thing in the whole world, pulling out his dragon cannon and squirting all over everything. 4 different elements triggers his passive for more charge attack damage. Zhongli's resistance shred makes all 3 of the others deal more damage. Favonius Lance on Zhongli means more particles for the team. I want to give a disclaimer that elemental application can be awkward in this team. Nouvelette can wipe the Pyro aura, which isn't too much of an issue given the individual units in the team are so strong, but you might want to keep an eye on it if you're using the team in endgame modes. Emilie's a burning unit who likes everything being set on fire, obviously very French of her. Not that I can talk, being from England, but let's put Pyro aside for a second and see if she works in Bloom. Emilie and Nalu with Kokomi on an elemental mastery build is a good core. For the last slot, you could go with Nahida for content with multiple enemies and Collei for single target. Either of Collei or Nahida will want Deepwood, which will help with Blooms, but also with Emilie's personal damage with her not having access to burning for her skill stacks or a passive. While it wasn't the best Bloom team I've ever played, for content with multiple waves, Emilie makes it so that you don't have to worry about reapplying Nahida's skill. This'll come in handy in those events where you get endless waves of enemies with low HP. It'll make her an okay option in Cave teams too, because I know he has a loyal following. Before Kaniche came out, people used to run Emilie in a burning vape team with Farina, Xiangling and Bennett. Swapping Xiangling out for Mawika and Bennett out for Mizuki gives us an alternative to it. Firstly, it's not anywhere near as energy hungry as the original team with Mawika instead of Xiangling. The downside to that though is that Mawika's relying solely on herself to build a burst with no other Natlan units in the team. Mizuki over Bennett means you can shred the opponent's resistance to both Hydro and Pyro, which is especially nice for Farina given the fact she doesn't benefit from Bennett's attack buff in the original team. The downside is that you'll find the off-fielders often have low HP with Farina's bleed, and healing the team with Mizuki is awkward. Obviously a lot of people skipped Mizuki anyway, so here's a more free-to-play version of it. I feel like Sayu is one of the most fun skills in the game, but there are so few teams she works well in. With her not using normal attacks, she doesn't synergize with characters like Xingqiu, Yelan, Beidou or C6 Fischl. Fortunately, Emilie's another drop and swap character which gives us the potential to get some Dendro reactions off. I use Dia as the Pyro unit and you can use a burst during Sayu's downtime. Sayu's holding Favonius Greatsword, 4-piece Viridescent Venera for Farina's damage, although you could give a 4-piece Deepwood for Emilie, and she's on a full elemental mastery build. I want to give a disclaimer that this team isn't as good as other Emilie vape teams, but if you wanted to do an Emilie plunge team, this is how I would go about it. C6 Bennett's going to give Emilie Pyro infused plunges. I don't think this team would work without his C6 to be honest, because Farina wants to vape the hits. I don't think it's the strongest plunge team either, but it does have a benefit over some other plunge teams. On top of having the plunges, you also have two constant sources of damage from both Emilie and Farina's skills. In normal plunge teams like Xiao or Gaming teams, your only summon damage is coming from Farina. It can be useful for picking off smaller enemies outside your plunge radius. For the last team, we'll look at Raiden. I actually enjoyed playing this team because you can pop Emilie's burst every rotation. I wouldn't pull Emilie specifically for electro teams, but it was fun to experiment with and it works in this current abyss. For a score out of 10, I think Emilie's a decent unit, so I'll give her a 7.5. There's been some undeniable power creep throughout Natlan though, and the teams associated with this power creep don't facilitate Emilie. She is flexible though and extremely easy to use. I dropped a similar guide for Mawika yesterday, and I'll have a guide for Inefa next week. Come join my Discord if you use it and take it easy.